Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The CTF today launches a court case against the government's capital gains tax hike. Plus, Premier Doug Ford calls early election, sending Ontarians to the polls next month. And Lethbridge Polytechnic announces an end to its language instruction for newcomers to Canada program, affecting at least 20 jobs and hundreds of students.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. It appears there could be a repeat of the Freedom Convoy protest. According to a report by Toronto 99, Canadians upset with Justin Trudeau's refusal to hold an early election are headed to Ottawa for an election protest. Several accounts on X are proposing the idea of a repeat of the mass protests held in Canada's capital back in 2022. One X user who seems to be spearheading the movement says, quote, "I want to make the objective of hashtag Convoy 2025 clear. Canadians are fed up with Trudeau and every party has lost confidence in his government. Proroguing Parliament to hold on to power is what a dictator would do. We're calling for the end of a prorogation so a vote of non-confidence can be tabled," end quote. According to the website Convoy Watch 2025, the original Freedom Convoy 2022 leaders are trying to stop this planned election convoy to Ottawa, which is being planned to coincide with the Freedom Convoy's 3-year anniversary. The World Economic Forum got underway this week in Davos, Switzerland, and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wants to ban all federal cabinet ministers from being involved in it. Today, he posted on his X account that the World Economic Forum elites are again meeting to talk about how, quote, "you will own nothing and be happy," end quote. Poilievre goes on to say it's an agenda Liberal leader candidates Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland share. He also included a link to an online petition to ban ministerial involvement in the WEF. He claims the public funds spent on these trips to Davos would be better used to support hardworking Canadian families. He says the policies of the WEF do not align with those of Canadian families. Well, the federal government is providing a $1 billion loan to Canada Post amid recent financial struggles. Canada Post says the funding will help it maintain solvency and continuing operations, but does not solve its structural issues. Public Services and Procurement Canada says the money will be provided on an as-needed basis and calls it a, quote, "needed financial bridge." The lifeline comes after a strike by Canada Post workers brought mail delivery to a halt late last year until the federal government stepped in to end the job dispute. Liberal leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland says if elected, she would scrap the changes to the capital gains tax, a tax that she introduced as finance minister. Freeland originally defended the changes to the inclusion rate, saying they were meant to address issues of tax fairness. She also told the media on Thursday that should she become the Liberal leader, she would propose to put in place a mechanism for the party to turf unpopular leaders in the future.
We can never again be in a position where the leader is the only person who decides who the leader is. And I think Liberal Party grassroots members and caucus need to have a greater say in what we do and how we do it.
And speaking of the capital gains tax, the Canadian Taxpayer Federation is filing a legal challenge today to stop the Canada Revenue Agency from enforcing a capital gains tax increase that has not been approved by Parliament. The CTF is seeking urgent relief from the federal court to block the CRA's enforcement of the proposed tax increase. In its application, the CTF argues the tax increase violates the rule of law and is unconstitutional. Here to discuss this in more detail is CTF Federal Director Franco Terrazzano. Franco, thanks for joining me. You say that the government has no legal right to enforce this tax hike. Why do you say that?
You know, no taxation without representation is more than just an important principle or a catchy slogan. It's enshrined in the Constitution of Canada. It's Parliament's job to approve tax increases, but the government failed to introduce legislation, to debate legislation, or to pass legislation into law. And yet the CRA is still planning to go ahead with this illegal and undemocratic tax hike. And so that's why the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has launched this legal challenge in the federal courts to stop these unelected bureaucrats from taking billions of dollars from Canadians through this undemocratic and illegal tax increase.
Okay, so Franco, tell me, what types of people would this affect? I would imagine this is people who maybe have a second rental home.
Yeah, this is going to affect many Canadians. In fact, this is really a financial sucker punch to many Canadians who worked their whole lives saving for secondary properties or saving so they can start a small business or even just saving for their retirement. Right. This is not only an undemocratic and illegal tax hike, but this is also going to blow a huge hole in Canada's economy. A recent report from the C.D. Howe Institute think tank estimates that the capital gains tax increase will blow a $90 billion hole in Canada's economy and mean 400,000 fewer jobs. So, yes, we are taking the Canada Revenue Agency to court over this illegal tax hike, but also this tax hike would mean major damage to the Canadian economy.
So are these fewer jobs that you're speaking of the trickle-down effect from these folks not being able to maybe start up a new business?
This tax increase will encourage that young, smart Canadian graduate from starting the next Google in Canada and instead push them to go to other countries and start the business there. This capital gains tax increase will also discourage investment coming in to Canada. Right. So this is an illegal and undemocratic tax hike, but this is also a tax hike that will punish the Canadian economy and Canadian workers.
Franco, thanks so much for taking the time for us today. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says he will be calling an election next Wednesday. That election call would send Ontarians to the polls on February the 27th, more than a year before the 2026 fixed election date. Ford is using the threat of 25% tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump to justify his early election call. Ford says the tariffs as proposed will affect all industries and families in the province.
We need a mandate from the people to fight against Donald Trump's tariffs, the attack he's coming against our families, our businesses, our communities. And with a strong mandate, we will be able to fight with Donald Trump to make sure we stop the tariffs and make sure that we give certainty to the people of Ontario. It may take investing tens of billions of dollars. We'll do tens of billions of dollars. It's no different than during the pandemic. We'll make sure we secure people's livelihoods, and I will do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario, in turn, because we're the engine of Canada, protecting all Canadians. We will not back down.
Turning our eyes to the west, United Nurses of Alberta is planning to host 13 different Day of Action rallies in cities across the province on Saturday, including right here in Lethbridge. The president of UNA Local 120 says the union is bargaining once again with the government. They are advocating for more respect from the government, fairer wages, and adequate staffing. The Lethbridge rally will take place outside Chinook Regional Hospital on 10th Avenue South at 11 a.m.
We've seen significant dismantling of our healthcare system and an ongoing impact because of these changes without any consultation from the union or the nurses. Nurses have been experiencing burnout at record rates. We have a great number of nurses who are leaving the profession. We hope to have newer nurses enter the profession, but often because of what they are encountering in our workplaces, they are choosing to then leave our profession. So what we want is to improve that staffing, make work better, which then makes patient care better, which makes our morale better, makes our quality of work better. And really, at the end of the day, the other piece is that we're all Albertans too, and we want to have good healthcare and good care for us. when and if we should need it, or if our families need it, and of course our communities.
The rally will also coincide with the anniversary of the first ever day of a strike of Alberta nurses back in 1988. More rallies are expected to occur in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, and Medicine Hat. Lethbridge police are looking for a man who allegedly offered a ride to a 14-year-old boy, then sexually assaulted him in his car on January 17th. Police say the boy was offered the ride while walking down Temple Boulevard at around 4:45 p.m. He was then driven to a secluded West Side location and sexually assaulted before being dropped off at a traffic circle on Métis Drive. Police have released this composite sketch of the suspect, who was described as Caucasian, between 30 to 40 years of age, clean-shaven with a pointy nose and some wrinkles. It was also noted he might have spoken with a stutter. The vehicle is described as a red Nissan Altima made between the years 2013 and 2020. It has black winter rims and chrome trim lines. Police ask anyone who recognizes the man or his vehicle or has more information to call Lethbridge Police at 403-328-4444 and reference the case number on your screen. Well, the Lethbridge Police Service has developed a new vulnerable person registry set to launch on Monday. With this new system, individuals and their guardians can voluntarily share information about medical conditions, preferred communication methods, sensory preferences, and other relevant information. The data collected will help police in their response to critical situations involving vulnerable people. The City of Lethbridge will be providing funding for various nonprofit organizations to assist in facility and equipment costs that enhance community services. The Community Capital Projects grant prioritizes not-for-profits that provides inclusion, diversity, and accessibility to recreational, educational, and well-being services. The first stream will provide up to $25,000 or 50% of total costs for planning assistance. And the second stream will provide capital assistance up to $200,000 or 1/3 of the total costs in facility construction, renovations, and major equipment purchases and upgrades. The application deadline for the funding is March 31st and can be found on the City of Lethbridge website. At least 20 employees and hundreds of students could be affected by the closure of the Language Instruction for Newcomers to Canada program provided by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. This includes the LINK program at Lethbridge Polytechnic. The decision comes as a surprise to many, and it sparked immediate reactions from the post-secondary's CEO and local and international students. Our Heidi from BCN has the story.
When I first came to Canada, I didn't know how to speak the language, not even a little bit. And if it weren't for programs like the LINK, I wouldn't be able to be where I am today. I wouldn't be able to be at university. Obviously, it's going to affect in a negative way, I would say, to all the immigrants because, well, how can you get a job if you don't know how to speak the language? How can you get better education if you don't have the basic English education? How can you create new relationships with people if you can't speak the language? So I would say that in many ways, socially, economically, academic, in every way, that's something that is going to affect the immigrants or all of those who do not know how to speak English.
The recent measure taken by the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship to decrease the number of new international students are already having a negative impact. Language instruction for newcomers to Canada, LINK, will cease to provide its services. The closure for the LINK program at the Lethbridge Polytechnic will take effect on June the 30th. This measure will also put at least 20 employees out of work. Brad Donaldson, CEO and President at Lethbridge Polytechnic, provides more details.
We are concerned this change will undermine the ability of newcomers to thrive in Canada and to fully participate in their communities. The changes to the LINK grant is just one of a series of changes IRCC has made over the last year that will have a detrimental effect on post-secondary institutions and communities across Canada. Across Canada, nearly $2 billion in tuition revenue is at risk with the loss of international students, and this doesn't include the economic benefits they bring to consumers and employees in our communities. The Centre has provided English language training on our campus for more than 50 years. Beyond language instruction, the Centre has provided a sense of community and belonging to more than 100 students currently and legions more over the decades.
They come with a dream of staying and supporting current economy while hoping for a stable lifestyle here. These changes have put a lot of strain on how they see their future going forward in Canada is going to be. It has a real impact on how we think of our future or how we do our studies.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
The Spring to Light Benefit Gala is the big event Lethbridge Family Services is hosting these days. And during the gala, well-known Canadian actor Rick Mercer will be the guest speaker. The executive director at LFS, Sandra Mintz, says this is the institution's first benefit gala. Mintz explains what the funds will be raised for and what the goal is.
Our goal is $50,000. We would love to make more, and we do think that the community will respond very generously to this fundraising event. It will go to pay for important programming for our clients, and particularly around mental health. And we hear so much today about the importance of mental health.
To end the night on a very high note, we're going to have celebrity guest, Canadian icon, comedian Rick Mercer is going to be spending some time with us, and he's going to be making us laugh, and he's kind of the cherry on the top to end a great night for a great cause. And we want to see everybody from Lethbridge to come, donate, buy tickets, buy a table, sponsor, participate.
Sounds like fun. The event will take place on April 25th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. Well, we saw a 60% chance of flurries today, and more is expected tonight. But the rest of the weekend, clear skies and even warmer temperatures coming up. I'll be right back with a look at the local and national forecast. Well, if you thought the flurries were behind us for a while, it turns out we could see a few more of those tonight, up to 60% chance, actually, and then that should be the last of it. But it means that tomorrow morning on Saturday, we're going to wake up to a fresh blanket of snow. But then, like I said, skies clearing, and we're going to be seeing sunshine for a while after that. And the best news of all is the rise in temperature. So the mercury's going to rise. So after Saturday's high of -3, we're going to be getting into the pluses there. So Sunday, high 4 degrees, high 3 on both Monday and Tuesday, all the way up to 9 on Wednesday and next Thursday. Look at that, high of 14 degrees. Didn't think we'd see that in January, double digits, not to mention teen temperatures. That's incredible. So average high for this time of year, -1, average low, -13. Record high on this day back in 2005 was 17. Record low happened in 1969 and it was -41. 8:14, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sun set today at 5:13 p.m., giving us 3 more minutes of daylight than we saw yesterday. 8 hours, 59 minutes of daylight, so just under that 9-hour mark, getting exciting. So clear skies expected tomorrow on the west coast. Victoria sitting at 6 degrees, Vancouver coming in at 4, 0 for the high, and Edmonton tomorrow with clear skies for the most part, and sunshine in Calgary with a high of -2. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we are seeing, we saw a snow advisory in effect earlier today in Saskatoon. That should be improving overnight, and then tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, -7 for the high, -10 in Regina, and -12 in Winnipeg, but lots of sunshine there. As we look into the central portion of the country here, Toronto could see a slight chance of flurries in the morning, then clearing, -4 for the high. Ottawa seeing 40% chance of flurries, -6, -7 in Montreal with increasing clouds. As we look into the east coast there, the Maritimes, we're seeing mainly clear skies actually. Fredericton high of -8 with sunshine. Mix of sun and cloud in Halifax, -5, -8 as well in Charlottetown with beautiful sunshine. And a mix of sun and cloud in St. John's with a high of -6. So there you go. That is your forecast. The Conference Board of Canada is forecasting the domestic economy will grow 1.5% this year. In 2026, the pace of growth is expected to increase to 1.9%. The report says a weaker Canadian dollar and strong demand from the U.S. should be positive for exporters, although the threat of tariffs makes the outlook for trade highly uncertain. The report also notes a slowdown in population growth will impact Canada's labor market. The makers of the popular hat, Canada is Not for Sale, say the last few weeks have been a crash course in manufacturing. Ottawa-based Jack Pine Dynamic Branding co-founders Liam Mooney and Emma Cochran say they've realized the difficulty of producing a ball cap fully made in Canada. The duo say several players in the apparel sector told them they don't manufacture hats fully in Canada because of the high cost and low demand. They've since found some hats completely made in the country, but are mostly relying on imported ball caps that get embroidered in Canada. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 34 basis points today to 25,468. The Dow was down 140 to 44,424. The S&P 500 was down 17 points to 6,101, and the Nasdaq was also down 99 points to 19,954. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 4 cents to 74.66 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to 4.02 US. Gold was up 14.20 to 27.77.30 US an ounce, and silver was up 35 cents to 31.02 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.55 per bushel, barley is at $6.57, canola is at $14.51, and corn is at $8.45 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was up $3.67 to $204.77. Feeder cattle January contract was up $1.62 to $278.70, and lean hogs February contract was up 17 cents to $82.30. And the Canadian dollar rose slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 69.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, there could be a repeat of the Freedom Convoy protest. According to reports, Canadians upset with Justin Trudeau's refusal to hold an early election are headed to Ottawa for an election protest. Several accounts on X are proposing the idea of a repeat of the mass protests held in Canada's capital back in 2022. One X user who seems to be spearheading the movement says, quote, "I want to make the objective of #Convoy 2025 clear. Canadians are fed up with Trudeau and every party has lost confidence in his government. We're calling for the end of prorogation so a vote of non-confidence can be tabled." According to the website Convoy Watch 2025, the original Freedom Convoy 2022 leaders are trying to stop this planned election convoy to Ottawa, which is being planned to coincide with the Freedom Convoy's 3-year anniversary. Well, coming up, menopause is a challenging time in a woman's life. Stay tuned to receive great information on how to deal with those crazy hot flashes and restless nights with natural nutrition clinical practitioner Liz Whitcomb. That's coming up right after the break. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And you can check out our website anytime to see more of our stories and interviews. Menopause, it can be a challenging time in a woman's life. Of course, there is the option of hormone replacement therapy, but this can sometimes have some undesirable side effects. So are there some natural solutions for menopause symptoms? Well, joining us today from Kelowna, British Columbia to discuss this is Liz Whitcomb. She is a natural nutrition clinical practitioner and a women's hormone health practitioner and the owner of Simply Balanced Holistics. Liz, welcome. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for having the menopause chat,
Yeah, I think it's important, right? Like, I mean, it's going to hit all of us but at some point, sooner or later, right? And maybe first of all, tell us a little bit about your clinic and what kinds of health issues you typically treat.
Sure, yeah. So I mostly work with women of all ages, helping them on their hormone journey. So I work for a clinic right there in Lethbridge, Roots and Fruits. I work with them virtually, and I also work for a virtual clinic up in Fort McMurray, where I used to live, mostly offering nutrition counseling with them. And then I do in person here in Kelowna at a clinic called Soka Healing. So yeah, mostly women, but I do work with men, women, children, you name it, for the nutrition side of things.
All right. Well, since we are talking about menopause, what are the different stages of it and what age range does this typically begin to take place?
Yeah, great question. So we'll start with the perimenopause phase, and there's like three phases here that you go through. So there's early perimenopause, which for some women can start in your mid to late 30s, but generally we're looking at early to mid 40s. And during this time, what you're going to see is you're still going to have a regular cycle, but things are going to either get a little bit longer, maybe a little bit heavier. You're going to start to notice like minor changes in the length and maybe severity of your period. And then when you go to mid-menopause, this is when you start skipping months. So you go 2-3 months maybe with not having a period. A few more symptoms start to creep in here. And then you get to late perimenopause, which is when you're getting closer to that 12-month anniversary of no longer having a period. And menopause is actually just like a one-day event. It's like a tick on a calendar, essentially. And it's that 12-month anniversary. Yeah, I know. Like that. It's confusing. So, but it's like that 12-month anniversary of not having your period anymore. And then you're in postmenopause. And yeah, so the average age for menopause in North America is around 51, 52 years old. But the best resource you have to kind of know when you'll go through this transition is to ask the women in your life. So if you have the opportunity to ask your mom, your aunts, your grandmother, genetics play a really big part here. So asking them can give you a pretty good idea of when you'll go through it.
Yeah, I mean, I know my mom seemed to suffer with it for about a decade. That's what it seemed like. So, I mean, and I think that mostly we're talking the symptoms of hot flashes. So, I mean, let's get into some of these symptoms of menopause, and it's possible she was already past it, but still experiencing symptoms. Maybe you can kind of clear that up for us.
Yeah, so with symptoms, honestly, it really comes down, like the severity of them comes down to how healthy you are, essentially, like how well you're feeding your body, are you moving your body, how's your stress. So some of the earlier symptoms you'll notice are like sleep disturbances and maybe some weight fluctuations. So these you'll see in like the early perimenopause phase. And then you move into the night sweats, the hot flashes, brain fog, mood disturbances. Some women even experience like tinnitus, the ringing in the ear, vertigo, frozen shoulder is a big one that we're hearing about now.
Frozen shoulder.
Yeah,
What's that?
It's so when you have trouble moving your shoulder up above, like, yeah,
A
or
certain
your arm.
range,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
You don't have your full movement range.
yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
some inflammation in the body. Yeah. And just because, I mean, it's a long list of symptoms. I know it might seem scary, but again, depending on your health, really depends on the severity. And you might not get all of those symptoms. One thing to keep in mind is everyone is very different. Women, we're all different in how we're going to go through.
Oh gosh, yeah, it doesn't sound pleasant. We'll just put it that way. And I would think that the brain fog and all of that is attributed to the lack of sleep, which is attributed to the night sweats and the hot flashes. It's all part and parcel, I think.
Yeah, there is a lot of connection with everything for sure, but there are ways you can help reduce the severity of those symptoms. It doesn't have to be a nightmare experience, you know. It is still a natural progression of life. I think it is still a little bit of a evolutionary mystery, but it doesn't have to be awful.
Right. I alluded to this a little bit in the lead, but I've heard some bad and some great things about hormone replacement therapy. So why are so many people hesitant to do this? I've heard it can actually be cancer causing. So are there, what's behind that?
Yeah, so I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't speak too much on hormone replacement therapy, but I can give my opinion. And what happened was in the 90s, there was a health study done, the Women's Health Initiative, and they were, doing, giving hormone therapy to women for hot flashes. And there was some information that came out saying that it was breast cancer causing, but what they didn't share were all the actual benefits that also came with it. And the increase in breast cancer was minor. So I think there's more work that needs to be done and more studies that need to be done. I don't think women should be afraid of hormone replacement therapy. I think finding a practitioner, a doctor, a naturopath who you trust and who you can have a conversation with, and who is knowledgeable in this area to see if it's right for you.
Right, because it is essentially a natural hormone that your body naturally produced that you're just putting back in your body. It seems odd that it would have
bioidentical hormone therapy. So I'm open to it, but I am, going to make sure when that time comes, probably in the next 7 years or so, that I find the right practitioner to help me through that.
Well, Liz, you don't seem to mind sharing this publicly, but you personally have had some struggles with hormonal issues and with PMS, and you found some help once you made some health changes in your life. So can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yes. So when I was a teenager and all through my 20s, I really struggled with my hormones. I was on every kind of birth control out there, I think, to try and regulate my hormones or balance out my period, which that's a whole other conversation. It doesn't actually work that way, but I really struggled with, heavy periods, really bad cramping, migraines every month, anxiety, depression, you name it. And it wasn't until I went to school to be a holistic nutritionist that I actually found relief and realized that the power that food has on the body is just incredible. And it completely changed my life.
Okay, so with that in mind, how important is diet then in treating menopause? What kinds of foods tend to be effective in relieving some of these symptoms?
Yeah, so diet is so huge. I am a huge promoter with all of my clients eating real food. So you go to the grocery store and it's one ingredient foods, basically. And if you're, buying processed foods, you're turning it over and you're not just looking at calories, you're looking at ingredients. And if you have a big long list like this full of things that you can't pronounce, it's probably better to put it back. It's probably
not very natural.
Exactly, yeah. It's going to be very inflammatory. And we don't want that. So eating real food, balancing your blood sugars, and eating anti-inflammatory foods are going to be what help you the most through this transition. So lots of clean, lean proteins, lots of fiber, complex carbs, and healthy fats.
Okay, so what types of foods then should be avoided?
So
just the opposite.
Long list. A really long list on the back. So the highly processed foods are going to be the hardest on your body because of the amount of inflammation. When you go through menopause, so you are losing a lot of estrogen, and estrogen is very anti-inflammatory. So you're losing all those beautiful anti-inflammatory properties. So for eating inflammatory foods, the transition isn't going to be as smooth, essentially. So highly processed, refined sugars, and your seed oils, so canola oil, sunflower oil, are going to be red flags. And all the things you can't pronounce on the back of a box.
Yeah, exactly. Would any of those foods attribute to stomach issues as well as you're going through that perimenopause, like IBS suddenly creeping up? Is that at all ever an association?
Oh yeah, your gut health is so important. Yeah, so all of those foods are going to disrupt your gut microbiome, which you also don't want to happen during that transition.
Definitely. Now, one of the associated problems with menopause over time also can be decreased bone density and muscle mass. So I'm told that exercise, of course, is one of the solutions naturally. So how much and what kinds of exercise are we talking about here?
Yeah, so muscle building. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, but building muscle, resistance training, picking up some heavy weights 3 to 4 times a week is going to be the most beneficial for you. So muscle protects your bone. And once you're in your 30s, you start to slowly lose bone mass. And then once menopause hits, because of that decrease in estrogen, you're more likely, you're more at risk to have osteoporosis. So the more muscle you have leading up to that, the more protected the bone is at the end of the day. So resistance training, yeah, is your best friend. And like I said, you don't have to go and be a bodybuilder, but you do want to do some progressive overload so that you are constantly stressing and building that muscle.
Right. And of course, we talked about this sleep loss, one of those no fun symptoms of menopause. So what are some of the potential answers for getting a good night's sleep?
Sleep, this one is tricky because, it's one of the first symptoms to come when you start going through that perimenopause transition, because you start to lose progesterone. And progesterone is like that calming hormone that helps you sleep. So when you start to lose it, your sleep can become disrupted. So this could be another area where maybe speaking to a professional about HRT could help. But from a natural standpoint, going to bed at a decent hour is going to help, like having a good nighttime routine. Getting off your phone or not watching TV 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed. That blue light can like trick your brain into thinking that it's daytime.
Yeah.
So it's going to really, really have a negative impact on your sleep. Sleeping in a cool room can really help, and having the room nice and dark. If there's light coming in, maybe getting like a face mask. My husband makes fun of me all the time for my little face mask, but
I do it too. Yeah.
I'm sensitive.
Love it.
So yeah. Eating well also is gonna be a big.
The problem with the cool room is that I guess like if you're going through sweats and then that finishes, then you're freezing because your body is soaking wet.
It can be, yeah.
It's just not a good time. And what about dealing with stress? Why is it that it's so much harder to deal with stress while going through this time of life?
Yeah, so when your body gets hit with stress, other functions in your body kind of take a back seat. So like your hormone regulation takes a back seat, fertility takes a back seat, digestion takes a back seat. Stress always wins. So when you're going through the transition, your hormones are kind of on a roller coaster ride, right? And when you add stress in there, well, you're just adding more ups and downs to this roller coaster ride, unfortunately, which you do not want, right? And stress, I always find, can be one of the more challenging topics when I'm working with clients, because everyone views it differently. You know, what stresses you out might not stress me out the same.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, I'm just wondering, you know, in dealing with hot flashes, in dealing with all of this that's going on, what are some kinds of, like, are there supplements, vitamins, minerals, anything that you would recommend to deal with these symptoms?
Yeah, with supplements, I'll be honest, it's tough to give a whole lot of info here without actually sitting down with someone to know exactly what they're going through.
So it's an individual journey.
Totally, yeah. Like one supplement I could recommend, it would probably be magnesium. Just because it can help with sleep, it can help with mood, it can help with inflammation. But again, like dose, when to take it, what type, is really just going to depend on the person.
What about ashwagandha? I've heard that can help alleviate hot flashes and help get your sleep cycle back. Is there any truth to that?
You know, ashwagandha is really great for stress. So if you're under a lot of stress, it can be really great at helping kind of balance that out for you, which in turn would help with your sleep and help with the hot flashes. Yeah, but working directly, I'd have to look into it. I'm not 100% sure if it works directly on hot flash, but as a whole system, it would help, I think.
It sounds like such a big topic, and it's such an individual journey, like we were saying. So I guess the best advice is to find yourself a practitioner like yourself, right?
Yeah. You know, really find someone who can help you work on the nutrition piece, the exercise piece, and the supplement piece, because it all works together, right? You can't do one without the others, basically.
If only there were one magic little pill that we can make it all go away.
Right? Yeah. Someone out there must be able to do this for us.
Liz, thanks so much for your advice today and for being on. And how can viewers contact you for help?
Yeah, thank you for having me. The best place to reach me would be on my website, so simplybalancedwithliz.com. And there you can go on to my booking links depending on what type of a session you're looking for. And then on Instagram as well at simplybalanced.holistics.
Okay, because I believe that you do online appointments.
I do, yes. So virtual and in person if you're here in Kelowna.
Well, thank you so much. Liz Whitcomb is the proprietor of Simply Balanced Holistics.
You know, many people agree that marriage is a relationship ordained by God, but it can be tricky to keep that relationship thriving. Today's guests are going to help us do that. Kelly and Joylyn Stickle are a husband and wife team, and they are the lead pastors of Parallel Church right here in Lethbridge. Pastors Kelly and Joylyn, welcome back to Bridge City News. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks, Ned. It was great to be here.
Excellent. Now, I'm curious, how long have you two been married now?
28 years.
Wow.
I have to double check that. Yeah.
Been a while.
To look at each other. So the romance sometimes can fade in marriage, and it's entirely possible that we may not even notice the signs. Why is that?
I think it's easy to just kind of do the motions, go through life, especially when things get busy and you have kids and the kids get busy and stuff. And so it's easy to kind of lose that and not see it happen unless you're intentional. I think intentional is a big part of marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to drift. It's easy to have just the busyness of life kind of occupy or preoccupy what the focus is. So like Joylyn said, is you have to be intentional in making effort to make sure that the marriage is priority over all of the distractions that can potentially come.
Yeah.
And once you notice the romance thermometer is dropping down, what steps should be taken to get the temperature back up again?
I think a big part of that, again, is the intentionality of making sure daily you're having connected time with one another, that whether that's a deep conversation or whatever, just to make sure that a priority daily. Weekly, it's great to go on dates and set aside an evening or time with each other. We like to quarterly get away for a night or two, yearly go on a holiday that just the two of us away from the kids and distractions of life, and kind of rekindle relationship that way. But again, it's intentionally saying, okay, we're going to put that in our calendar. We're going to make it a priority, make our marriage a priority, and focus on doing just that and put it in the calendar, not just saying we want to, but actually put it in the calendar.
Yeah. And I think the Bible says where your treasure is, your heart is there also. And so I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical treasure, but if you figure out what your spouse's love language is and how they feel loved and connected, then intentionally putting that treasure into your marriage, your heart will follow if it's kind of lagging behind. But yeah, I think it's easy, like we had said, it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed and just go through the motions. So just being intentional, putting it in your calendar is a big part of it.
Now let's talk about married couples for a bit here, because long ago I was married and didn't last very long, but I want to talk about like the honeymoon phase, because that can wear off sometimes. And I noticed that very early on into my marriage, I started noticing things like, oh, like she's snoring louder than she normally does, or like has her morning breath always been that pungent? So what are some steps to stay in that honeymoon phase or keep it going longer?
I think the honeymoon stage is often what we classify as the feelings of love, that feeling part of love, which is there, and it's a real thing. But love is much deeper than just the emotions that we feel on a time. And so when we get familiar with someone and we get to know them, we get to see the real them. Sometimes the feelings aren't there, but what Paul describes love in 1 Corinthians 13 is like love is patient. Well, I don't remember the last time I had the feeling of being patient. That's not it's not a feeling driven thing at all. And love is kind. Love is doesn't envy. Love is keeps no record of wrongs. None of what he lists in 1 Corinthians 13 is based on feelings. So there are decisions that we have to make on a daily basis and push beyond the feelings, the emotions, the triggers, all those things, and just say no, despite the nuances of being imperfect people with one another, that we're going to push beyond that and choose to love, choose to be kind, choose to be patient, choose to be keep no records of wrong, and make those choices every day.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that, especially however long we've been married, you're always growing as a person, or you should be always growing as a person, and your spouse is always growing as a person. So if you are stuck in who they were when you were dating, and not allowing them the chance to grow and the growing pains that go with that, then you're taking away a lot of what real life is. And the beauty of being in a partnership like a marriage is that you get to grow each other, and you get to iron sharpens each other, right?
Right.
And it's a cool thing to just give them the space and give yourself the space to become who you're becoming. And that is hard sometimes, right?
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's important for couples to communicate in some fashion that you love and appreciate one another. I mean, I've heard some guys say, like, well, I told you when I met you I love you, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. Obviously, that's not healthy. So any suggestions on how we can do this and how often we need to show our love and appreciation?
Love languages.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you should be the biggest cheerleader for your spouse, and you should be the biggest student of your spouse. And so figuring out who they are and how they feel love, and and show them that way, because they're going to feel it better that way. So with the love languages, like mine are words of affirmation. Mine are most of them, but he says I'm either easy to love or hard to love, because I'll take it all. But I'm easy to love, right?
Yes. Very much.
So words of affirmation, if he doesn't as much get that, or feel loved by that, he feels loved more by the acts of service and stuff. So if I'm constantly just gushing on him with words but don't do anything for him, he's not going to feel that as much. And so again, being intentional, being the student of your spouse, and making it your priority to study who they are and how they feel loved is a big part of it.
And if couples haven't read that book, The 5 Love Languages, it's a must for every marriage. And the natural tendency for all of us is, like Joylyn said, is to give what we receive naturally ourselves, is to give that back. But that's not necessarily the language that our spouse receives. And so we need to be able to speak their language over our own preferences, and give preference to what they need most, and do that on a daily basis. Like that's not something that you let slide for a while and say at the altar and never say again. like it's a daily practice of making sure that they feel loved and cherished, and our priorities over anyone and everyone else.
Yeah.
I agree what you said about the 5 love languages, because it's amazing that book has really gained popularity even in non-faith relationships. In fact, being on dating apps, I've noticed a lot of people are even asking what their love languages, asking each other what their love languages are, or saying these are my love languages, or they're sharing their Myers-Briggs. But what really fascinated me was they are talking about love languages. So I think that's really fascinating, that something that came from a Christian author is really so popular amongst all kinds of relationships here. Now, I've also noticed that marriage experts encourage couples to find things that they both enjoy and to do those things together. But that can be tough to find time with kids and work, etc. So how do you find time?
I don't think you ever find time. I think you have to make time.
You claim time.
You claim time.
Yeah.
And I think you have to make it a priority and saying, okay, well, if we just wait to find time, life's going to eat that up really quick. I think you have to be intentional and make the time, and pay attention rather than just get distracted or what grabs your attention. Pay attention, make the effort to pay attention to your spouse, make the time to be together and to do things that you enjoy together. Yeah.
And I think it's super healthy for kids to see a strong relationship between parents and to not be the center of attention. So they're going to go into stronger relationships when they're older if they've seen it demonstrated throughout their life, and they've seen dad prioritize mom over them sometimes too, right? And vice versa. And so you're helping your children by showing them how a good relationship works and that mom and dad are prioritized, and that gives them security as well, to know that that they're secure in the family.
Now, today's couples typically watch a lot of TV programs together, and there's a lot of binge-worthy content out there, but they can also get influenced by social media, and this can portray a somewhat unrealistic view of what a husband or wife should look like and how they should behave. Do we need to adjust our marriage expectations?
Absolutely. I think social media has probably done a greater disservice, I think, than even television lately.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times what we do, we can walk right into the comparison trap where we begin to compare our behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reels. And we have to recognize that what is portrayed on social media is somebody's highlight reels. You're not seeing behind the scenes. You're not seeing all the messes and the messiness of life that is real.
Yep.
And so it's dangerous to watch somebody on social media or watch a marriage on social media and going, oh, I wish my husband was like, or I wish my wife was more like, or I wish our marriage was like that. A very dangerous thing to do, to walk into that comparison trap, and it puts undue expectations on yourself, but undue expectations on your spouse. And recognize, hey, our marriage is different than anybody else's, but this is our marriage. We don't, this is our relationship. This is our personalities coming together to becoming one, and it's not going to look like everybody else's.
And over time, we can start to get critical of one another, especially like if we're seeing the same person every single day, day in, day out, every day, every weekend. How can couples break that cycle of negative communication?
In the art of communication, like, psychologists will talk about changing the story in your head. And oftentimes we go in with a preconceived, especially to those that we're closest with, we go into a preconceived idea of, oh, they did that on purpose, or they're trying to, and we ended up getting critical because they forgot this again, or there's just like them this. And psychologists say, change the story in your head. And like Joylyn said, is hey, when we were in love, when we got married, why would somebody who loves me so much promise, their lives with mine, why would they intentionally try to hurt me? If I can change the story, they're not intentionally trying to hurt me. And just simply changing the story in my own head is going to allow me to enter into the communication with not defensiveness, not angst. It's going to allow me to enter the conversation with, hey, being open and saying, hey, this hurt me. I felt this, and I know you didn't mean it, but I felt this, and it becomes a lot easier to have a conversation than going in accusatory.
Yeah.
And as unique and wonderful as we all are, that means we are all wired slightly differently, which can lead to some conflict. So once an argument starts, what advice do you have on how to fight fair?
Well, some of the advice that I use and we use and that we counsel other couples in is to avoid starting an argument with an accusation. So avoid starting an argument with you always. We typically say things like, you're always late, or you never do this for me, or whatever. And we encourage people to not use the words always and never, because they're never true. And to not start a discussion with an accusation with you. Instead, begin the discussion with, or turn the discussion with, hey, I feel, when this happened, when you didn't show up on time, when I expected, I felt disappointed, or I felt this. And it's very difficult. People do it, but it's very difficult to argue with someone's feelings. And it's more like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, I'm sorry. We end up typically going into a more of a having a conversation about the real issues rather than arguing over, well, I was on time. You're always late. No, I was on time 3 weeks ago. We start nitpicking over the little details, and the argument goes way off the rails, and becomes accusatory. So our natural response when somebody accuses us is to get defensive, and then we fight back. But if somebody begins the conversation with "I feel," it's, I'm not feeling like I need to get defensive, and I'm not feeling like I need to go on an attack mode. I want to have now the conversation and get to the real heart of the issue.
Yeah. And you need to make space for grace in your marriage, in yourself, and in others, right? And it's just the grace that we get from God. We need to be thankful for that and extend it to others.
I love that. Make space for grace. And how important is it to sincerely apologize for the wrongs and to forgive one another and leave the past in the past?
Very important, I think, just with anybody, right? Like you hear it said that unforgiveness hurts you more than anyone else. But when you're in a tight marriage and a partnership, it's going to hurt anybody around you. And the shrapnel from that is going to just continue to hurt people. And so it's important for your own health. It's important for your marriage and your family and any dynamic around you to forgive and just to move on and work through things. Definitely, if there's things that need to be worked through, and let go of things that just need to be forgiven and moved past.
Kelly and Joylyn Stickle are the lead pastors of Parallel Church in Lethbridge. Kelly and Joylyn, thanks so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
I'm Naveen Day on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.